there folks, today will be our first pesto making for the year, so I thought I captured that on video. Our recipe is not the super traditional Italian one, and it has been modified to fit our available products better, and most importantly our taste. The main ingredients are of course the basil leaves, which I have harvested yesterday, olive oil. We use any of the available extra virgin Italian brands we have currently on sale, some salt. The cheese traditionally is Parmigiano Reggiano, but as we don't have a affordable source for that, we usually use another hard cheese such as Grana Padano for a substitute, which then we grate finely. And as the pine nuts are not really easily available here and they're very expensive, while we have our own walnuts, we use the walnuts, and also they impart much better taste in our opinion. So the process actually starts way back in late spring when we seed start our basil, and then we plant it out in pots, which I will show you shortly. And then at about mid-July, usually is the first pick of the basil. We don't pick all plants, we pick selectively leaves and growing tips so they can branch out. The leaves are usually washed and then dried for a few hours on a towel so they don't have much water on them. What the process is usually is we blend with a simple kitchen blender the leaves with salt and olive oil until we get a nice paste, which is what pesto is. Paste in Italian, pesto basilico. And then we slowly add by hand, mixing with a spoon, the grated hard cheese, the grated Grana Padano, and using the same grate, we grate the walnut nuts. And the finished product we put in small 200 milliliter jars and we freeze. This is the most common way we grow basil here. In the garden it does not get enough water and it's usually too sunny for the plant to develop properly, while those small pots of about 50 centimeters length seem to be perfect. You can see here how I harvested the plant selectively. I removed the bottom larger leaves. You can see the stems left over here and down below, and also trimmed the main growing tip with the largest leaves. That stops the plant from producing seed heads immediately, and it promotes those side branches to develop. So in a few weeks you'll be able to harvest those leaves, which will grow progressively larger. And if we're lucky and we have a long season, we can probably do another batch in early to mid-September. So I have now blended the basil with the olive oil and some salt. This is the consistency that we're looking for. And now it's time to grate the hard cheese. But before that, I just wanted to talk a bit about the proportions, the general proportions of the recipe. Of course, I will include those in the notes. I used 300 grams of basil leaves, that bowl you saw a moment ago, and 300 grams of olive oil. And I'll be adding 200 grams of hard cheese. Some years we do a more cheesy variety where we add the same amount of cheese as the basil. So for 300 grams of leaves, 300 grams of cheese. But this year we wanted to experiment with a bit more basil heavy variety, as you can always add the cheese later as well. This is usually used as a salad dressing or with some type of pasta, which gets cheese on top of it anyway. And for those 300 grams of basil and olive oil and 200 grams of cheese, I'll be adding maybe 100 grams of nuts. And if I consider that to be a bit low, I can add another 50 grams. So now I have broken and cleaned some walnuts and measured, and now I've loaded them here, and I'll just grate them as well in the same bowl with the cheese, and then I'll be mixing those two together. And now I poured the pesto out of the blender jug into a wider bowl, and I'll be adding and mixing in the nuts and the grated hard cheese. This is the proper time to do a taste test and see if it needs more salt. Usually we use about for this amount, for 300 grams of basil leaves, I use about 5 to 7 grams of salt, because the cheese is also rather salty most of the time. And after I have mixed this thoroughly, I will be start putting it in the small jars I told you about. Those are the jars we are using. They're each 200 and maybe 50 milliliters. Twist off cap, and after they're full, I try to remove as much air as possible. I pour a bit of olive oil on top to reduce contact with the air, and then after I have wiped previously the rim, I'm just twisting the cap on, and then after I'm done with all those jars, I'll be putting them in the freezer. So I'm done with filling the jars. Of course, they are second-hand jars, so they have random labels and caps on. I got 6 jars out of the batch. So to summarize, this is 6 jars of 210 milliliters each, which came out of a 300 gram basil leaf batch, and those will be stored in the freezer now. You can boil those to sterilize, but we've tried that a few years ago, and it really changes the texture of the pesto, and also, most importantly for us, changes the taste. It becomes like a cooked product. That's why we initially were buying the Barilla brand, which is the most famous brand here for the pesto basilico. But after we started growing basil and doing our own pesto, we found that there was a huge difference in freshness and taste. So that's what we do, and we try to make about 20 of those jars each year. And I have just a little bit, maybe a spoonful of the pesto left in the bowl, and I'll just make a tomato salad in here now and use that. And the salad is ready now. This is a very simple, quickly thrown together village salad. It has some of our fresh tomatoes from the garden, cucumbers, some of our homemade feta cheese, the residue of the pesto, which I just made, and also some olive oil and parsley. I also add a few cloves of minced garlic to it for extra punch, and finely chopped hot pepper. So that's all for now, and I'll see you in the next one.